Thank you for tuning in to the Northeast region's headquarters for hunting-related stories and tactics, sourced from DIY hunters and industry insiders. This is Hunting the Empire. Now here's your host, Joe Mainville.
Hey everybody, Joe here with another episode of the Hunting the Empire podcast. On today's show, I speak with Tim Bunao, a bow hunter from central New York. We speak about his scouting tactics and his plans for this upcoming bow season. Let's get started. All right, and on the line, I got Tim Bunao. How we doing, Tim?
Hey, not too bad. Yourself?
Oh, pretty good. Can't complain.
All right.
I guess if you want to start off by giving everybody a little bit of a background on about yourself, kind of where you live, and what you do for a living, and what are your hobbies?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I work for a major retailer, big box store, if you will. Work in the hunting and fishing department, and I guess we're in central upstate New York. Other than that, I same thing as you do. I love to hunt. That's the main hobby there. Everything about it. Anything
go ahead.
Anything in the outdoors, really. It's basically my hobby. I really don't do too much other than work, gym, and be in the outdoors. Honestly.
Sounds like the life, man.
Yeah, kind of.
How long have you been hunting?
Okay, well, I grew up for the first part of my life, I grew up in PA. I started hunting when I was 12. Kind of self-taught. I did start out with a farmer. At summertime, I didn't move off to, but basically when my mother was working, I went to a farm and kind of hung out there for the day. It's kind of like my daycare, I guess you could say. And I started hunting with them, and then just kind of blossomed to another thing. When I was, late into high school, I would go to the video store and rent Monster Bucks or Babe Winkleman Inside Fisherman videos and watch them on the weekends when everybody else is partying. And that's basically what I was doing. I did end up finding another hobby at one point in time. I was about 18 years old. I started riding BMX, and that had moved me to Louisville, Kentucky. I was down there for 7 years. I traveled up and down the East Coast, rode BMX. And then just one day I was invited to go fishing. I caught like a 40, 50-pound catfish, and that just sparked it again. And I've been back in New York for 5-6 years now, and it's been full bore, basically. So there's a little bit of break in there, but it didn't take long for me to catch it right back up to it.
That's cool. How much you get any fishing done still here in New York?
Yeah, I don't do that too much. Anytime I try to do anything else, all my mind goes to is the woods. So it just doesn't work out. I could be on a trout stream, and the first thing I look at is like, oh, this could be a pinch. Look for tracks.
Yeah, I think you're preaching to the choir with everybody who listens to this type of stuff, and I think you got to be bit by some kind of bug to listen to hunting podcasts, and it's a whole nother animal.
Yeah, when you have a podcast on, you got the volume up in your vehicle and you're in the middle of a traffic jam, you got people talking about deer and stuff like that, you definitely turn some heads.
Yeah, that's true. You hunt mostly public or private land?
Yeah, I'm 100% public. I guess you could say I had a couple opportunities to go hunt private, but I love the fact that you can hunt public anywhere in the U.S. And I mean, he's just your opportunities are out there everywhere. I mean, just you might have to do a little bit of driving. You might not have the quality of what some of these people, who quality manage the area, but you can find yourself some good deer, and you can also, if you put the work in, you can find yourself a good quality sit for every part of the season, through all the phases of the season. If you really want to, you're not forced into going to the same stand over and over again on your property or whatnot. It's just it's fun. It's always something different, and even hunting with other hunters that you don't know of, using them to your advantage. It just throws another wrinkle into it, and I like the chess match.
That's interesting. I know when here a handful of years ago when I started hunting public land exclusively, I was also pretty new to bow hunting at that point, and I liked the idea of, public land offered me an opportunity that if I went in and I happened to mess up a spot, which I did many times, I
Oh
will
yeah,
admit that I still have plenty of other ground that, when I hunted private ground, I pretty much only had 40 or 50 acres. And if I blew out an area, I mean, you lose a lot when you blow out
yep,
that small of a chunk of ground. So, um,
yep, absolutely.
I really liked having options, and so I work in agriculture and I drive all over the state. So public land was really awesome for me to be able to throw my tree stand and my bow in the truck. And if I got done with a farm soon enough, no matter where I was in the state, I could go in, hop in some public ground somewhere and have some extra sits instead of
Yeah,
just the weekend. So
and that's what it's all about too. Like if you don't have um, if the timing's not right for one of your main spots, is what I call it, your honey hole, uh, go to another different piece of public and go have a set. You try your hand at some blind sits, and see what you can do. It cures the itch to at least be out in the woods while your other spots, ripen, I guess you could say.
yeah, no, it's really cool, and definitely would recommend anybody out there to, if you haven't explored public land, to give it a shot. We all pay for it, so
Yeah,
might as well
exactly.
use it.
It's ours.
Exactly.
I know my area of New York, within a 45-minute drive, I have a little over 2,800 or 28,000 acres, just within a 45-minute drive.
Yeah, and it's awesome. Yeah, we're blessed in an area here in central New York to have some really good opportunities.
For sure. And it's just you can't get caught up in what everybody seems like today's day and age. Everybody's all about inches and size and this and that. And realize your area, and find what you can find, basically, and be happy with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So how do you set up for the season? So everybody's chomping at the bit right now. Here in New York State and Pennsylvania, uh, both seasons are getting ready to fire off here within the next 2 or 3 weeks. What's your preparation for this early season been looking like since last season?
Oh, as soon as season ends, my next season begins. I don't even say I have two separate seasons. It's just one continual season, just overlaps each other. It just one point in time you have a bow in your hand, the other time you don't. It's basically after the last day, I start hitting up notes from the in season. I keep really detailed notes throughout the whole entire season. Every day when I leave the vehicle or before I leave the vehicle, I jot down specifics, temperature, wind direction, the area I'm headed to, the set I'm headed to, all the little fine details, the percentage of foliage on the trees, everything I can try to mark down quickly. Then I head out to the stand. When I come back, it's mark down what I saw, what I observed, this and that, and it kind of just rolls over to the end of the season where certain little things throughout other sets will start to connecting the dots. So, and then it's kind of like I have priority list. So I start hitting up areas that I already know of. I get sets prepped, and as soon as I'm done with my major areas, then I start to explore. I start cyber scouting different areas, looking for better areas, and it's basically just snowballs from there.
Can you, there's a couple of different things I think would be interesting in here. Can you take me through, uh, what do you do for your cyber scouting? So say you've picked out, uh, say a whole new piece of public ground, you've never stepped foot on it. Where's that start for you, and how does that work when you're looking to cyber scout it? What are you looking at? What are you looking for? And how do you how do you bust it down to then what you're going to go out and boots on the ground look at?
Yeah, absolutely. So most of the stuff that we hunt is hill country. So I just use that as an example. They do differ a little bit from swamps to farmland and everything, but we'll just use hill country as an example. First thing I do, I look at it, and it has to be hard to access. I have to find some type of limited access, whether that be a water source, super steep hills, anything that would kind of separate myself from others. And I say that as like I tend to think that I'm pretty physically fit, and if I'm kind of looking at an area and I kind of say, man, this is gonna suck, I should probably go there. So that's the first thing I kind of look at, and as soon as that's sets into play, then I also look into the surrounding areas, private pieces. If there's a whole bunch of little small chunks of private around it, I kind of tend to not look at it. It seems a lot, those smaller chunks, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump for them to hop right into those backside of the public pieces. So, you could walk that mile and a half back there, but those guys are only going 200, 300 yards from their back door, and they're already into that back area that that you want to get into. So that's another thing that kind of separates some areas. And um, Onyx Maps is huge. I'm a huge Onyx Map fan. I probably get more data charges from that than Facebook or Instagram or anything like that. But LLC labeled properties, if you do any type of cyber scouting, I'm sure you've ran into it before. Big Buck LLC, stuff like that people label their properties as. That's just a huge key too. Most of these guys are spending. I think I looked into at least one time for one of the local logging companies, and it was something $7,000 for a 60-acre lease or something like that. It's absurd. So these guys are spending that money. They're not going to go over to most likely I should say they're not going to go over to that public piece. Why would they do that when they have this well-managed land? So that would be another little area. And, half the time those deer are on the opposite side because they won't go over there. All the pressure is right that little corner. It's just pushing those deer over to the public. And then as soon as nighttime drops, that's when they come over and they feast on those lush brassicas that guy planted. And from there, it's kind of Xing out the spots from the access, where I feel like hunters would most likely travel. Your field edges, your old logging roads. If you get on Google Earth, scrolling through the history bar, you can see when it's been logged, if it's been logged, and most of the time you can spot out by twisting the images around a little bit. You can spot out old logging roads. There's old logging roads that kind of connect close to the parking area. You can pretty much count on people using that to get back there. People don't like the dark. People are scared of the dark for some reason as well. It seems, and they like to have an easy access into it. So that's something they like to use a lot. So I find a lot of stands not too far off those logging roads.
Yeah, I know I use Google Earth for the history as well. And the cool thing that I found about it was that on those managed pieces where maybe it's state game land or federal game land that they've done some sort of select cut or clear cut on them, a lot of times they leave um, portions, almost like fingers of timber in there. Maybe there was a swamp or uh, almost like a hedgerow or something that they might have left, but over the years it grew back up. And
Hmm.
I've had a lot of success setting up on those terrain features, those areas that they left when they logged. That I think what happened is the deer ended up using those as a travel area when after they logged it, but then through their offspring and then the offspring's offspring, they just still kept on that same path, even though the woods had kind of grown up around it.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, those are solid, transition lines. So when it's being logged out, obviously it gets pretty clear, and then all that new undergrowth grows up, and it just becomes super thick. So you have your hard line of the trees that were left right next to the new growth, and especially within the first 2, 3 years, 4, 5. That growth gets super thick, and it's also good vegetation for browse. Browse is something that I think people uh, miss. Um, well, not miss, but yeah, actually they do miss it. Everybody's looking at the hard mass and everything like that, but there's so much browse in the woods that those deer don't need to really leave a lot of those areas. So being on that transition line, that's just it forms a new travel corridor, like you said, and that's kind of like when it comes down to from the scouting too, if we're using the aerial maps, look for a lot of those the old log road areas. You can guarantee that's going to be a thick area, and most likely on that transition line, there's going to be some type of sign laid down, some travel, some rubs, scrapes, depending on what the deer are doing elsewhere.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And when when you're doing your digital scouting here, I guess what kind of animals are you targeting? Are you looking for areas when you're circling out? So I got an idea of you're marking off stuff you want to avoid to then break down,
Yep.
and this is what I'm going to end up scouting. What
Yep.
what kind of areas are you looking for? Are you looking for stuff that um, just has a concentration of deer, or are you looking for specific, um, you know, buck bedding areas or doe beds in order to kind of play those during different times of year? What do you focus on?
Yep. Yep. So I mean, after I mark everything out, that's going to leave, a portion of the area that I feel like that would have the least human pressure on it. And then from there, those areas, being in the hill country, any type of steep military crest, that's going to have a good um, seasonal use, basic military crest that's facing north. That would be a good for south wind. A military crest that's facing south, that's going to be a good north wind bedding. A military crest that could be around here. Predominant winds are basically south, north, and west. So an east-facing point or a military crest, that's going to be a good west point or west wind. And of course, there's going to vary. Nothing is ever directly north, south, or west. But those little areas, really steep with a good solid 1/3 line going around it, that would be the leeward side from those predominant winds. Anything about the 1/3 line around that hill is really where you see the most buck bedding. And I kind of skipped over that part, but I'm looking first and foremost for buck beds. Any big mature bed, big bed. That's the only way I can really uh, define the difference of the beds I'm looking for. You can go around and you see a couple beds, and okay, this could be a buck bed, and it could have a rub in there and whatnot. But is it satellite bedding or is it the predominant bed? From there, when you see a mature buck bed, it's just the size of it. It's like you have all the other ones you're finding are a bunch of Priuses parked there. Then all of a sudden you find that Cadillac parked, and it's monstrous kind of a deal. Um, And I'm looking for like anything that's going to be the most give a buck the most secure possible situation. To me, first and foremost, all year long, they're except for one part of the year, security is uh, their number one focus, and they have to survive. If not, they die. So that's the first thing I'm looking for. Anything that's going to be give them an advantage.
Okay. And so you're targeting those big buck beds. You're looking for those military crests, third from the top. How often is it when you're looking at those? I'm assuming you're using like a topo map.
Yep.
Okay. Um, how many spots are you narrowing down on a piece of ground generally that you can go out and then put boots on the ground and and try to find when you're you know if you find an area, I guess we'll say hypothetically, that you find, you've cut off all your access points. You've got some areas that's a military crest, but maybe you've only got two on that entire property. But then you've got a piece down the road that might offer a little bit more. How much time are you going to spend on that other piece that's given you just a couple of sign?
It all depends. From there, from just the topo map, say we just have the two military crests there, I'm gonna switch the topo map over to an aerial map, and I'm gonna start going over the different time frames, using the Google Earth, going through the time frames, looking for those hard transition lines, difference in vegetation, and I'll link them up uh, to those bedding points, those super thick areas. And man, I get really excited when I see that there's a good military crest, a point that has been logged 5 years ago or something like that. And then it's just super nasty right there. You got to get through briars to get back to that point, and most likely, and actually that's probably one of my best beds that I've ever found, is within a situation like that. And the loggers who have been back in there, basically they just left trees upon trees. It's just blowdowns on top of blowdowns and trees, and it's just a big mess to even get back in there. And that's probably one of the best beds I've ever found. But once you start linking things together, and it's kind of okay, well, this could hold, this could hold a buck, and it's back in there checking it out. And even though it could only have 2 points, that could be that one buck that you're looking for. I mean, they're not very and they're not a social animal when they get bigger. So being singled out and having that one predominant area, he's going to control those 2 points. And if those 2 points are even close to each other, where you can switch on a wind shift, that's even better. So yeah, kind of key in on that one. And then, like you said, the one down the road that has multiple spots, that one could still hold a good deer. Definitely not saying it couldn't, but having multiple spots like that, you're going to be kind of running around. To me, I feel like that'd be a total mess of satellite beds. Different bucks, different bucks bedding here and there. It'd be a little bit harder to narrow it down to, I guess you could say a predominant bed. More bedding options, more chaos kind of a deal. Not chaos, but more confusion for my part, I guess you'd say.
How do you, and I hear these terms thrown around a lot, and I can say personally, I'm not real good at this, and I'm sure maybe there's other folks out there who are not either. When you're finding these buck bedding areas, how can you tell if they're primary bedding, secondary bedding, or what do they call tertiary bedding as well? How can you tell the difference between all those different beddings?
Yeah, that's something. It's something I'm still learning. It's something I've gotten better at. The honey beast, Dan Infalt, something that you and I are familiar with.
Hmm.
If anybody listening is not familiar with it, I really highly suggest you check it out. You join the forum. Hundreds of absolute killers that are real world situations. You and I, blue collar. and work 40 hours a week, don't have property. These guys are constantly every single year putting down, hammers every year. Um, since joining then, everything has just skyrocketed as far as mature buck sightings. Um, it's just it's just amazing. But narrowing down the difference between them, it's really for me, it's a feel thing. If you're sitting there and if we're in March, it's kind of a hard thing to do because there's no foliage on the trees. So you have to use some imagination there. What's this spot look like when it's green up? What's this buck doing? Lay down, sit down in that bed, look around. When would he be using this? Some of the beds, the bigger ones, it can be found. There's no rubs around it. Some of the other beds, there's a rub right in it, and it might have a good rub line coming right out of it. So you pretty much know that deer is using that bed during the rut, kind of a deal, pre-rut to that area. From the scouting then too, you can find out that there's a doe bed area not too far away from there. So it's kind of everything comes right down to scouting. But as far as identifying the different beds, it's really probably the hardest thing to do about the whole entire area. Trail cameras has been a huge help in the learning success or the learning rate of that. Running those cameras outside of a season, I'm actually running some cameras right around the bedding area of a couple that I feel predominant areas are the primary beds. I'm letting them run. I'm just going to let them run. I'm not going to check them. It's just going to be for future reference. If that big buck is there, he's using it. If he makes it again, when I go check it in January, then good. If he made it, then most likely I'm going to have a good solid chance at him coming next year, because around that time frame, I'm going to see when he's going to use it. So I should have an opportunity at him. If nothing's being used, if it's a random type of bedding, then I'm going to kind of move on from there. But yeah, it's something that I'm really just starting to know, and I really can't speak on it by saying a definite here or there. It's just something that when you see it, it's just like, okay, well, everything makes sense. This is why he would be here 24/7. This would be the primary spot for him to bed at, or the most secure area possible is going to hold the biggest deer.
Okay. No, it makes sense. And I think a lot of it too, it comes down to, I know when I was talking to the other day, it amazed me how many hours you put in scouting. And there's a reason for that, and there's a correlation, I think, between your success and the number of hours you've got boots on the ground trying to narrow down all these details. So I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, what was it? By June this year, I had a little over 200 hours of scouting. That's not including driving to Pennsylvania, Ohio. And that's just around New York State, basically. But yeah, over 200 hours by then. I blew that out the door by now, if you include trail cameras and stuff like that. But my main thing with all the scouting is I'm trying to find as many quality sits as possible, for all phases of the year. I don't want to. I think it was last year I got sick of it, where I kind of at one point in time, it was getting to the point where, like, well, I guess I'll go here, or I kind of guess I'll go here. Like there's little wrinkles here and there where I kind of was indecisive on some things. I don't want that anymore. I just want to find as many quality spots to go sit. I even look at east to wind sits too. Like, how often do we have an east to wind? Last year we started out, the first week was almost all east winds. Yeah, I know a few people were just kind of like, okay, well, what do we do now? Kind of a deal. So I even added those kind of areas in, into that. And then it's something I've changed a little bit too, is the trail cameras. I'm not hunting behind them anymore. That's basically all I feel. That's all you're doing is hunting behind them, especially within public. There's so much that can change. This year was the first year I've had hunters on my camera preseason, and they had two dogs with them and smoking cigarettes right in front of the camera. You know, but so some things change, and this and that. So if that's the case, and that's what happened, I'm gonna be fine. That was a good area that I had for a kind of a preseason, not preseason, but early season. I'm 100% fine because I have another area that's just as good. So that's the whole entire point of me scouting so much. And on top of it, I just love being outside. I would much rather be outside walking, on a 30-degree day with a hoodie and a coffee, just exploring, looking for things, and than anything else really. I'd 5 o'clock in the morning get up, make the drive on a day off, and that's just what I choose to do.
Oh, that's cool. Thinking you mentioned something about early season setups here, and it sparked an idea in my mind that so you've gone through all of these. You're doing all this scouting. You're spending countless hours with boots on the ground. You're identifying these Cadillac bedding areas and even these these not so maybe the Lincoln bedding areas that you think you want to give a shot to. But what what tells you, what's something that you're looking for that says this is something I'm going to hunt in like early October to mid October, kind of that pre-rut time frame? What's your game plan for that, and what tells you while you're out there scouting that this is a good kind of pre-rut setup spot?
Yeah, so the early season, I kind of separate my areas from your early season, which is your first 2 weeks. That's when a lot of pressure is going to hit. Those are some of the beds that you find that maybe aren't being used right now, but they were used right after gun season. So that tells me that they feel secure back there. Also, depending on the weather too. A lot of stuff you find if you go out during while there's still snow falling, you're gonna find them yarded up into an area, which is another clue. Every time you're out there in the woods all year long, there's clues for everything. It's just a matter of putting them together. But yeah, some of that early season stuff. A couple of my beds that I have a planned hunt for, I'm not going to hit into the second week. I'm hoping that the pressure from that first surge of hunters is going to push, all that scent in there is going to push them back into this one little core area. Another one is just it's a predominant. This is a primary bed. I hit this spot in June, April, no, July. Actually, it was end of July. I had failed to hit the spot several times, and I finally made it a point to go hit it. And man, it did not disappoint. It's just a classic bed. What is it? South to north point, south to north ridge. That kind of dog left, or hooks to your right, which would be to the east. I think it's about 500 feet of elevation and under, or a little over a quarter mile. So it's really, really steep around this whole entire side. And where the hillside or the point starts to veer to the east, it creates a great little point. The plus part about it, so that steep hill is one of the only access at the very bottom. If you try to park there, all your thermals are just pulling right up to this buck bed. If you try to park, he's literally right above the bed or right above your parking area. If you try to get there too early in the morning, then you're cutting all of his trails where he's leaving the bottoms. He's coming up. From the opposite side, it's just this huge, huge piece of property that you can't access from. From the south, there's a couple private, but how we talked about how those smaller chunks, how they'll kind of cruise right in there. There's a guy, the owners basically, they have a 4-wheeler trail going right into this piece of public, and it is going right to a tree stand. Basically, there's 2 tree stands. The path stops, and from there you can almost see both tree stands, and that's the south of it. South wind, early season. that deer, he's laying on that point facing north. He's got all that wind coming right over his back. He's smelling those guys as they're approaching there. The only way to even get back into this area is it's a little over a 2 mile 2 mile hike from a bottom on the opposite side of the hill, which is actually a huge ravine that comes up to another hill, and circling all the way around and coming up to this point. It's just a killer spot. When I found it, I might have been about 50 yards from the spot. I kicked up a deer. And the body size of it, obviously, I didn't see what it was on. If he was holding or whatnot, the body size was just, massive as it took off. And it didn't take off like most deer do. Sometimes how you kick a deer up, how they just, blow right out of there.
Mhm.
This deer, he snuck out. He wasn't trying to create a whole ruckus or whatnot. He snuck out around and then dropped down that hillside, which to me, I feel like I've seen it several times. That's just a mature buck, just the way they act. They realize that when they create all that ruckus, that kind of causes attention to them, maybe. But he snuck right out. By him being there in end of July, I'm gonna say he's gonna be there in the bed too. So the bed, it was completely worn down to the dirt. Hairs in it, had long hairs and it had short hairs. What that kind of tells me, he kind of uses it year round. The longer hairs being from wintertime shedding, and then the shorter hairs, all throughout the summer, belly hairs. So that kind of is another little clue, I guess you could say, that I could have mentioned beforehand about the bed. So I'm really excited about that set. I think I got to sneak into about 60 yards from there, so it should be interesting.
Does that happen to be on a piece of property that we mutually hunt?
No, but it's no, but you were not far off from there, my friend.
So for everybody listening, I didn't know Tim until a couple of weeks ago, and I met him. Well, he ended up finding me on Instagram. Come to find out, Tim and I only live about an hour to an hour and a half apart, and we hunt some of the same ground. So it's funny that we both spend quite a bit of time in the same chunk of public, and I'm sure we've seen each other's vehicles, but we've never seen each other out there.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, it's just funny, small world with that one.
yep. Especially the hunting world in the Northeast.
Yeah, out of all that public.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah,
that's a big chunk of public right there. And even in that
yep.
area, there's more. So it's kind of funny though. But um, well, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, you said so much in there that just makes a ton of sense. And I really want to stress to everybody listening. Uh, the only thing I thought while you were going on about this absolute dynamite spot is I could hear you rifling through your notes, and it just goes to show like you know so much about these areas because of the detail of information that you're keeping. If people are out there and they're not like questioning this stuff when they're seeing sign and keeping notes of it, it's so easy to forget through the course of a season. But uh, you've got records going back, I don't even know how many, months or years or whatever. You know exactly what you've been looking at for like historical information
Yep.
when you're going out there.
Yeah, that's something I picked up from the Beast, and a guy on there. I hope I don't butcher his last name. Joe Elsinger.
Okay.
Uh,
Yep.
Joe R.E. He's a what do you call himself? He's a spreadsheet freak, and his data is just mind blowing to what he does. And the note taking, that's where I kind of got my hunt journal from. I deliberately copied exactly what he has, and that's what I've been running with. And yeah, like you said, the journal keeping, the notes. Um, Prior to that, you can go out and scout and hear this and that. 4 months down the road, you go back into it or whatnot. Yeah, I think this is going on, this and that. There's just too much I thinking. I want to know. I want to know exactly where things are, what I was thinking when I found it. So that's part of the reason why I carry a notebook with me. I have a waterproof notebook. It's like made out of stone or something like that.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's a waterproof notebook, and it's it really is. It's really about slowing it down too. When you scout these pieces, taking into consideration every little thing you find. Like, as I'm walking through, I'll even notice browsing areas. You can see, if you really stop and look, and you see areas where everything has been trimmed right down. Whether it be bushes or tree limbs and everything. So there's some browsing area going on in there. Um, as I'm walking through, scouting, looking for everything. I'm throwing milkweed too constantly. I want to see what the winds are doing in there. Our hill country is the hardest thing to learn winds on. Uh, Best advice is stay up top. Stay away from the bottoms. It just swirls. It takes a long time to learn those bottoms. I think I'm on year 3 on another piece. I'm just now starting to get the confidence where I think I can get in there. And again, too, a lot of it's trial and error. You're gonna blow some hunts. You just have to accept that. But yeah, the milkweed, keep it in hand, and as I'm walking through, as I'm finding spots, I'm throwing the milkweed. A lot of times it doesn't correlate to, or I shouldn't say correlate, but the days I'm scouting will be a different wind than the deer are actually using those areas. But you can tell that. It's just it makes sense. Like all of a sudden you see they're running a ridge line, and most likely they're using it on the opposite wind, kind of a deal. You can just tell it. But um, by using milkweed, it just helps you to see what the wind's doing through those areas, especially the valleys and stuff like that. Um, yeah, I mean it's just something I love to do. It's really actually really hard to kind of explain on the phone, but I guarantee you, and I went for a walk in the woods, things would make a whole much more sense. I'm a lot better at, showing and, pointing out and seeing live examples at doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one thing to hear it, and then if anybody listening too, obviously you can go back and re-listen, which I always recommend, not only because it's my podcast, but I re-listen to podcasts all the time, especially when, there's information that I might have missed. A lot of time I'm listening to podcasts in the background, and if I pick up on something that I think is worth listening to, I go back and listen to it again. But I'm a note taker. Not so much. Unfortunately, I don't scout a ton, and that's something that I'm really going to be working on changing in the next season, um, because I think that's a chink in my chain that that's my weak point. So, but I keep a lot of notes when I'm listening to podcasts driving down the road. I take notes on stuff that people are saying. So um, but the notes that you've taken, and even being able to describe that, um, that area that you're looking to go back into, you explain it very well. A lot of points in there. I kind of felt like I was in there with you with the descriptors that you're giving, and that's what amazed me was the notes that you'd taken off of that, and that you're able to kind of recreate that area in your mind, even from just months ago.
Yeah, I mean, once you find those spots, like I said, I'm really really excited about the spot, and everything just once your scouting starts to really take a hold of learning, really, really recognizing what these deer are thinking or how they're using that terrain, man, it's just the best feeling in the world. And when uh, you're doing the cyber scouting and everything, and then you're like, okay, well, I think this is where it'd be, and I mean, literally, you're feet away from the waypoint that you marked on your or on your GPS. That's how close you were. That's how close I was with this one. It was just like, man, it's just the feeling of it. And then it's just, from finding that bed, it's just working backwards. What else are they doing in this area? This and that. And, so it's, yeah, scouting's definitely one of my favorites. It's almost as exciting to me as the hunting aspect of it in general.
Yeah, no, that's, and there, it's definitely a must for anybody who's really looking to take their hunting to the next level. Especially, hunting deer is difficult, but hunting specific, you know, very specific areas for mature bucks is very difficult.
Yeah.
And it's not just something you can kind of meander out into the woods and do consistently. There's got to be preparation for that.
Yeah, I mean, and some of the areas too. So it's not just, we'll go back to kind of like the scouting part of it. So you go in there and you might not find that buck bed, or you could find one you're not that excited about. And kind of some of my point at, was working backwards. So from there you go explore those. You have your secondary. Always have a backup plan and a backup plan. So the bedding didn't work out. Okay, well, let's go check out the saddle. So you're gonna start checking out saddles and benches, looking for the old sign. When you find that scrape, figure out, okay, well, why did they lay this here? Is it on a major trail? Is it a crossing? Is it close to bedding? So from that scouting, from going from there, I work backwards, and that's going to tell me, okay, well, this area I should probably pay attention to in pre-rut. This area, is definitely a rut area. There's doe bed here, kind of a deal. So, it really does. It all comes down to scouting, and really don't just look at the sign as in, oh, here's a rub, here's a scrape. Why? What direction was he moving to? And it's almost like a CSI investigation.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like you're definitely digging into that crime scene for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, How give me give me an idea how this has played out successfully for you. Maybe even you could turn this into a bit of a kind of a hunting story. What's an example that you've got that you've done some digital scouting, gone, put boots on the ground, found these bedding areas, and then you came back, set up on them, and like they must have read the script or something because everything must have played out as well as it could have. What you have anything that worked out just as better than it probably could have?
Uh, I mean, actually, the past 2 years has been, what- last year I ate tag soup in Kentucky and here. The year before, it was kind of a cyber scouting. I had just gotten on the beast, so all this kind of stuff was new. I had done some scouting of an area that I was obsessed with when I first moved back. It might have been my second or third sit. I go back in this area, and yeah, one of the largest deer I have ever seen up until then stepped out in front of me at 35 yards. I wasn't comfortable taking that shot. That sparked a whole entire different aspect of my life with the shooting. I was uncomfortable about taking that shot, so I had to let him walk. I think it was the very next day he came back in, worked his scrape line back up into it, and that was the last time I saw him. I never got a shot at him. But I ended up, doing the cyber scouting. I did put some boots on the ground. I found some doe bedding, and it was in November. Actually, I called a buddy up, and I was like, I'm just getting out of work right now. I might have like 15, 20 minutes sit. Should I go? And it was kind of just a blind sit too. As I knew there was bedding over the one side, but it was also on a western wind, and I was going to be on the leeward side of it. So I figured, if anything, we'd be cruising to that bed. I've never been to this area before, so I kind of find myself a good area where I can get up into a tree. I was covered. My thermals would, I'd be missing the deer. Basically, all my scent would be taken care of. And yeah, I got set up, and I think within 20 minutes, the doe brought by a decent 8-point, and yeah, I drilled them. Then last year, fast forward it, a little bit more experience with it. Within the first 2 weeks of season last year, I had seen 3 different target bucks. All of them were basically within target range or within shooting range. Just my setup was a little awkward, off. The way I had the tree set, the tree stand set up, the brush. I didn't really account for coming out a certain direction. I read it wrong. And then in Kentucky was a completely blind set as well. That was just reading maps and glassing. going back, reading the maps, figuring out where they're coming from, and then yeah, I ended up passing. It was probably would have been the largest buck I'd have taken. Would have been about a 120 something, 8, and I let him go because I'd seen another deer that from glassing the previous night that was easily high 130s to 140, so I was holding out for him. But yeah, so it definitely I consider it, for me personally, I consider success to see 3 target deer, 3 mature New York State public land bucks within the first 2 weeks, all different sets, all different areas. So I'm right there on the verge. It's kind of another. I'm really chomping at the bit to get at it this year. So,
Yeah, no, I think it sounds like it's shaping up to be a good season for you. I'm looking forward to seeing how it all pans out. I'm curious here. You had mentioned with this one deer that came in at 35 yards, and you didn't feel comfortable with that shot, and that sparked something else in you. What what happened there, and how have you changed your preparation and your tactics since that?
well, I mean, that was, like I said, that was probably the largest deer I've seen since, or up until then. Uh, I actually had Dublin White Oak. He's just this big, beautiful 8 mainframe, white, pearly white antlers on him. It's just gorgeous deer. But the spark is it lit was he's 35 yards, in open 35 yards, and I just was unprepared. I wasn't prepared to take a shot like that, and
I
since
think
then,
kudos to you, you know, right away there that you were able to have enough composure with that in front of you to still think about an ethical shot. I'm not sure that um, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, but not everybody. It would be very tempting, even at 35 yards, to take any kind of shot at a deer, even whether they were comfortable or not. So, kudos
I
to you.
think,
And
yeah, I mean, it definitely wasn't easy. That's for sure. But I think it was the night before. I had taken a couple shots at like 30 yards or something like that, and just out back of the house. And I think my first 2 shots like completely missed the target. Um, and then I was just too inconsistent with it, and there's nothing worse than seeing an animal suffer and to making a bad shot. And I just want to make sure I make the best, cleanest, ethical shot I can possibly take on a deer. It's just something that I guess like you said, I hear it working for big box retail. I I come across all walks of life, and yeah, I constantly hear so many stories of wounded deer and this and that. And I just, one, I don't want to be part of it. Two, uh, I don't want to go back home and try to sleep after making a shot like that, knowing I'm gonna go back in the next morning try to recover them. And I don't want to search that long. It's tough to follow a bud trail 100 yards when it starts to drop out. I'm not just trying to I'm not trying to grid search looking for a deer. Um, that's just the way I guess you could say I'm wired for it. I won't lob it now. Uh, since then, I pretty much warm up at 60 yards right now. 50 to 60 yards. I'll warm up with a couple shots. I practice. I can shoot all the way out to 110, 120. It depends if I feel like setting my target out, but yeah, I'm pretty confident in my shooting now. Still, if you're in the woods, yeah, I'm not gonna take a shot long distance to the woods. There's so many variables. Uh, Being mindful of what the deer's doing, if he's sketched out, if he, not, what his body language, that'll play into a huge part of, what kind of a shot I would take. But most areas I'm in, I can't get a shot over 25 yards. It's just so thick. It's so gnarly, some of these areas, that it's just impossible. I run a 1 pin and it's set at 20. So, and my bow shoots fast enough and I shoot heavy enough arrows where I feel confident and I don't have to make the change.
yeah, No, I'm with. So I'm curious. All right. So you decided that at 35 yards, you were not comfortable to make that shot on that buck. And since then, now you're comfortable, obviously not taking a shot on an animal, but you practiced out plus 100 yards. What did
Yep.
you do in between to gain that confidence? Because you said it, previously at like 30, 35 yards that you weren't shooting that consistent. Now you're shooting consistent enough with enough confidence that, you know, you're shooting at targets 100 plus yards. For everybody out there who's trying to gain similar confidence, but also, I've never personally shot past 80. Um, and I'm not even that good at 80, but I practiced at 50 and 60 all the time to be prepared for 20s and 30s. But how, what did you do in that in between as far as like either training or whatever to get yourself to that point? Because I know it's not just a switch in mindset. There's something else there that got you to that point.
Yeah, I watch a lot of Cameron Haynes and Levi uh, Morgan videos.
Just
No,
soaking it in by osmosis.
yeah, basically. Yeah, I mean, actually, Cameron Haynes was actually a huge part into taking the shots, getting that kind of confidence on it. He had a simple statement: if you're confident at 80, then 20 yards is a chip shot, right? So, kind of playing to that one. It was just literally taking it more seriously, working on my form, uh, YouTube videos. YouTube videos about my form, kind of a deal. Figured out this and that. What I'm doing, I switched an arrow setup too to a little bit better, for a long distance, shooting. And it was, I mean, it was really just slowly stepping it back, going from 30 to 40 to 50, knowing that I'm going to lose some arrows, when you start getting back out there, uh, starting to realize every time you start to clench your bow hand or you punch the trigger or whatnot. That's why, when you shoot out that far, every little tweak of your form will show. And it's just, something that I wanted to make it a personal uh, goal and to be comfortable at. Actually, it was actually I only made a personal goal to go 40, but went to 40, why not to go 50? Went to 50, why not 60? So then I had the capability in a yard to reach out to the 100 and so it was kind of got some hay bales for extra backstop and just started making the shots from out there. Uh, Pretty, I'd say 2 out of 3 arrows will hit a paper plate at 100 yards on it. So I'm not, I'm definitely not, grouping them in at inch groups or something like that. And it's more or less just for fun. It's awesome just watching the arrow just soar through the air and a second later your bow hand's already down, and then all of a sudden it's like you hear that thwap into the target. It's just a great feeling, a cool thing to do, just to shoot that that kind of a distance. But I would never attempt to take that shot at an animal. There's just so much that can go wrong.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, me personally, I've got such horrible vision. I'm not even sure I could see a target at 100 yards. So,
When I first did it, the it was a different sight I had on it, and what is it like? It's the bigger of the pins, but it's like 19 or .019 or something like
yeah,
that, or but hey, it covered up like the whole entire uh, the ring on a bag target. And I was like, well, I guess I'm there, right? So, but yeah, that's just something that took hold, and actually that kind of led into another thing, which is um, the fitness level of it, of for me, for public land hunting, to get back into some of these areas is I compete in the train to hunt competitions. If I know a lot of East Coast people aren't aware of it. It started out as a Western hunting competition. Not really even a competition, more of just a way to keep people in shape, mountain fit. If you've never done Western hunting before, up in those hills are no joke whatsoever. And then you throw on, some weight, and yeah, it's just a different kind of suck. Um, yeah, there's some of the military guys that do it. They like to chant out, "Embrace the suck." So, but yeah, so I got involved in that, which has some long distance shooting involved in it. But for the most part, they're all real life, shooting situations. A little bit different from 3D shoots. They make you, you might have to kneel behind a tree, draw, stand up, take a step out to one side or the other to make the shot on the target. Similar to what you would do in a hunting situation or spot and stalk, and steep shots, things like that. And it's a fun competition. And then the fitness aspect of it, it's just making everything so much easier. These areas I talk about, some of my buddies, they look at it and she's like, yeah, that's steep, kind of a deal. And that's the kind of reaction I want to get. I want to get the reaction, someone saying like no way, kind of a deal. Yeah, I'm going to do it. I don't ever want to, look at a spot and be like, I can't make it in there. And at the same time, I don't want to look at a spot and be like, I can't get a deer out of there. I want to be able to pack out anything possible. I owe it to the animal and the meat. Gotta have that fresh tenderloin back in their camp.
Yeah, you gotta get it all back without having to call the buddies to come help it get it.
Exactly. Half my buddies won't go back there anyways.
Yeah, you'd be carrying them out too.
Yeah.
So, well, Tim, I want to be sensitive of your time. We've been chatting for quite a while here, but before we get done, if people want to go find out more about you, obviously, I know you're on Instagram. Where can they find some more information about you and follow your adventures here?
Yeah. So Instagram is just basically my name. It's Tim Bunao, which is TIMBUNAO. That's the Instagram name, and then Facebook would be the same thing. You just got to watch out between the two. My father shares the same name, so and we're father like son kind of a deal. I guess we kind of look a lot alike. So I've seen some friends, or new acquaintances, ask him for a friend request on there, but. Yeah, other than the Facebook, which I'll be shutting that off shortly anyways before season. I just don't like being bothered with it. I'd rather stare at a topo map while I'm on stand than look at, cat videos. But
don't hate on cat videos.
I'm not I'd rather watch a puppy video, but
Fair enough.
Yeah, but other than that, the Hunting Beast. And basically my last name, and then that's the only forms of real social media I'm on. I'm pretty much keep to myself.
Yeah, that's we found each other somehow, so you're accessible on social media somewhere.
Yeah, and anytime I see a topo map, I'm always looking. So
yeah, especially when it happens to be a spot that you hunt as well.
Yep. Very familiar.
Yep. Well, Tim, I really appreciate you coming on and again taking the time out of your schedule to get on the horn and chat with me for a while. And if you wouldn't mind holding on for just a second, I'll wrap up the show and chat for a couple more.
Yeah. I'd like to say too, I really appreciate the opportunity, and I had a good time and always love talking hunting.
Yeah, man, it was great. We're definitely gonna have to do it again.
Well, there we go, my friends. Another episode in the books. Thanks to Tim for taking the time out of your schedule to come on the show and talk about your tactics and your plans for this upcoming season. Wanted to just put a reminder out there to everybody to please go on to wherever you get your podcast from, whether that be iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, CastBox. Please go on and hit subscribe and leave a review if you haven't done so already.
The only way I can move up the ranks on those podcast sites is to have more reviews, so please do so if you haven't already. I also wanted to let everybody know to please make sure you go on and hit subscribe, because the episode next week will be a very special episode with a special guest, and it'll outline very specific details on how you, as a listener of this program, have an opportunity to win a brand new Bowtech bow. So please go on and hit subscribe and look out for that next episode. And until next time, take care and God bless.